G'day mates, it's Busta here. So before the video begins, I just wanted to let you all know that I'm going to return to the long form content again. This means I'll be posting 1 or 2 longer videos a week with a compilation of true scary stories being featured. The reason for this is that, through my assessments, I've found that the longer you guys watch, the better the channel does. Plus, regardless of YouTube's algorithm, I don't want to lose my roots. This channel was built because of what we have here, and I don't want to lose that, for anything, even if it means taking a hit from the algorithm. So, if you want to support this channel and if you want to help this channel grow, please be sure to watch this video all the way through and feel free to go and watch more of my videos straight after this one to help out if you wish. Also, I've decided that I'm going to take my series stories over to Twitch permanently to diversify a little. So if you would like to listen to the series stories, please open a tab in your window by right-clicking the link to my Twitch account in the description below, and hit the follow button to be notified of when I'm live streaming and when new videos are out. It's completely free to follow and make an account too. I also will likely be doing a scary story night live stream there too, where I'll be listening to stories, talking and having a nice night with all of you guys once a week. And if this sounds like something you would enjoy, be sure to follow me on Twitch. And finally guys, I want to do more subscriber stories and less Reddit stories moving forward. So if you want the chance to have your story featured on the channel, please send it through to my email, which is also in the description below. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. I hope you enjoy the video, and without further ado, let's begin. A few years ago, I was home from college for the weekend. The house I grew up in is old, over 100 years, and I've had some experiences there before, probably paranormal related. But this one night is something that I will never forget. It was around 11 PM and I got back home from visiting my then girlfriend who lived in my hometown. I get in the house and open the door that leads to the upstairs, where all the bedrooms are. I close the door quietly so that I don't wake anyone up and head up to my room. I close the door to my room, sit down at my piano and start playing with headphones in. All of a sudden though, I get this incredible wave of fear. I feel like something is watching me. I'm terrified, uncomfortable, shaky. I start looking over my shoulder every few seconds. Then I finally decide to just stop playing piano and go to bed. I turn the lights out, get into bed, and after a few minutes, my door slams. Then I hear this loud noise from downstairs. I turn my lights on and then hear someone walking down the hallway upstairs and then going downstairs. I figured my dad went to check the noise out, so I poke my head out of my door. Well, my mum comes walking back upstairs, and the exchange went something like this. "Hey mum, did you see what that noise was?" "What? Wasn't that you?" "That noise was the door slamming shut. Didn't you just get home?" No. I've been home for about an hour now." There was silence. Of all of the other harmless haunting events in my house, this was the first time I ever felt truly terrified. I'll never forget the feeling of that irrational fear. I can't even use words to describe the way I felt. I should also mention that we searched the entire house, and there were no signs of an intruder or entry at all. I was 7 at the time that this happened. My mother worked for the government and left the house before my brother, myself, and 2 sisters woke up for school. My stepfather was in charge of getting us up and onto the bus. He worked from home in a shop that was built into the side of our house. None of us know when the place was built, we just know that it was old. Everyone had a strict routine, as there was only one bathroom between the 4 of us. If one of us slept in, we didn't get a shower. But that almost never happened because my stepfather would literally drag us out of bed by our feet if we were late to wake up. One morning, I was sick and running a very high temperature, so I stayed home. My stepfather took my temperature, and it was at 103. After he'd routinely shipped us all off to school, he drove us down to the store for the newspaper. But on this day, he had to get my medicine for my fever. I had watched all of my siblings get on their separate buses, one by one, and then my stepfather hop into his old truck and leave. I was alone in my house. It was acceptable to be left alone, as the store was a 20-minute round trip at the most. Anyway, so yeah, I'm sitting on the couch, sweating and violently shivering. I didn't even want to move to turn on the TV for those sweet morning cartoons we missed every morning, when all of a sudden, I hear footsteps upstairs. I thought to myself then, that's not right. I'd watched everyone leave. So I fought through the uncomfortable fever and walked upstairs to see who it was. Every room was empty and quiet though. I was calling out and there was no one there. I started to feel like I was dying from the fever and went back downstairs to wait for my medicine. My stairwell was deep and it curved into a 180-degree turn. Where I was sitting on the couch, I could see the base of the stairs and the first half of the turn as they rose up to the left, disappearing into the stairwell. I'm shivering and sweating, and I hear more footsteps. They slowly crossed above me, and then slowly back the same way. All of a sudden, whatever it was started running at full speed, all the way across the hardwood floors, and started down the hardwood stairs. I saw a large hairy leg with a white sock stop halfway down the stairwell, then turn around and run right back up the stairs. It ran right above me upstairs, and slammed a door. Immediately after the slam, I could hear what I can only describe as off-key open mouth humming. It was coming from all corners of the house and changed pitch every couple of seconds. After a few seconds, I screamed, shut my eyes and covered my ears. And it all stopped. At this point, I'm hyperventilating, and all of a sudden, the closet door opened, and a lone, unnerving vocal sound started up from inside the dark closet. I cry as I see a disembodied head pop out and back in as it shuts the door, the vocal sound still going. Then I see and hear another pop in and out from the kitchen, then the stairwell, then the dining room, and then the closet again. It all became unbearably loud and fast until I just passed out. I find it hard to describe what the heads or the faces look like, because I can't really remember. But one thing I'll never forget are the odd sounds. My stepfather woke me up and gave me Benadryl, took my temperature, and I was at 107. I told him what had happened as he was getting ice packs ready, and he said that it was all a hallucination. But that was the scariest 20 minutes of my life, and still to this day, if someone or anyone peeks their head around a corner the wrong way, I will freak the fuck out. I've always chalked it up to hallucination, but then again, I can't discredit the paranormal either. In April of 2016, I flew to Nashville, Tennessee to purchase a vehicle from a relative and drive it back home to Texas. I got a late start on the day I left to drive home and ended up getting a cheap motel room in Jackson, Tennessee. I won't say the hotel name, but it was right off of Highway 40 and very cheap. My room was on the second story of 2 on the back of the building, near the center. I can't remember the room number, but I wish I did now. The room itself was indistinguishable from the rooms of any other cheap motel that lines the highways of the US. There was a tiny bathroom, a full-sized bed, a desk, 2 chairs, and a dresser across from the bed. The dresser featured a fairly new yet very cheap TV and a coffee maker that used paper cups instead of a glass pot. The room was a half suite, which meant that it had an interior door connecting to an identical room next door. The door connecting the rooms was metal and hollow. I closed the curtains and got settled in. I didn't have much in the way of luggage, just a small bag with a change of clothes. I took off my shoes, changed into some basketball shorts I used for pajamas, and sat down at the desk to some dinner in front of Netflix on my iPad. At this time, it was coming up to 8 p.m, and the sun was almost completely set. Shortly after I started eating, someone began pounding on the door connecting my room to the next. It wasn't very violent, but it was quite rapid and loud. It sounded like a small child was laying on their back with their butt up against the door, kicking at it with the back of their heels or something, and I assumed that that is what it was. Having been a bored child in similar circumstances in my youth, I just let it slide and didn't do anything. It stopped after maybe 10 seconds anyway, and I resumed watching my show. The pounding proceeded to happen though, every 10 to 15 minutes or so for the next few hours. Each time, it would last until I finally decided to get up and do something about it, and then it would abruptly end. It also seemed to get progressively more powerful. I could actually see the door shivering in its frame as it was pounded on. I couldn't hear anyone dealing with the child through the door, so I didn't think I would accomplish much by complaining to them either. I was also really tired and didn't want to deal with it anyway. And really, truth be told, I didn't want to try and open that door too. I told myself that it would be weird, like a violation to try and open the door into my neighbor's private space, and that it probably wouldn't be unlocked anyway. But really though, for reasons unknown, I just sort of dreaded the idea of opening it. It became a moot point anyway, because the pounding seemed to stop at about 11 PM, and I went to bed, then quickly to sleep. But soon after midnight, the pounding began again, more violently than before. Well, that was the last straw. The pounding stopped as I pulled on my t-shirt and shoes, but I was going to do something about it this time. I still didn't want to try the connecting door, so I went outside, intent on knocking on the exterior door to the room to find out what was going on. By the time I went outside, the pounding had stopped for 10 or maybe 15 seconds. As I crossed in front of the room's outside window, I stopped dead in my tracks. The curtains were all drawn back, so I could clearly see inside by the parking lot lights. Inside the room, the lights were off, the bed was still made and unwrinkled, and there was no visible sign of luggage. The bathroom was open and dark, and even the plastic covers were still on the paper cups next to the coffee maker. There was not a mark on that side of the connecting door, not that I necessarily expected to find one. I stood there for the better part of a minute, watching for movement, and saw none. That room was unused and empty. I went back to my room, turned a chair to face the connecting door, and sat watching it for the next hour or so. I was pretty scared, but figured that I wasn't in any immediate danger, or I'd be dead already. I thought about calling the clerk, but didn't want to sound crazy, or confirm that there was a history of strange events there, which, for some reason, seemed even worse at the time. Luckily for me though, the pounding didn't occur again. Eventually I went back to bed and I slept pretty well. I awoke at about 10 AM, took a shower and left without talking to the clerk. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before or since that night. And the thing that sits with me the most is how uneasy I felt in that other room. When I was younger, we heard noises in the attic almost every night, like boxes being thrown around and furniture falling over. Sometimes my dad would pull down the stairs and go up, partially to prove to us that no one was up there and that nothing had moved, and partially because it would sometimes get too loud for him to ignore. Everything was always the same as it was. There was never a big mess, and his job was pest control, so when he said it wasn't a raccoon or any animal up there, he knew what he was talking about. This was an old Victorian house in New England, by the way. The house was always haunted, and we all knew and discussed it. We would hear footsteps upstairs when no one else was home. Doors would open and shut in the same fashion, mainly the heavy old back door. We had an inside and an outside door on the back of the house, the inside one being made of cast iron hinges and solid wood, and the outside door being at the end of a small sunroom porch and more recent. The inside door was old and too big for the door frame due to warping, but most nights we would hear it slam, even if we could account for everyone being upstairs. Eventually, it actually split in half, like you could just open the top if you wanted, and was bolted with black cast iron bolts, and it was never as easy to open and close. I actually never saw anything, just heard it, even in close proximity. You could hear a door shut, but your peripherals would never see movement. The most notable experience, however, was when I was in the 8th grade. That attic had become the bedroom for me, my two brothers, and my sister a year or two back. Real stairs had been installed at the end of it. One side was the boys' side, and the side with the stairs was her side. It was divided by a chimney in the middle, with the door at the bottom of the stairs. Now, underneath the stairs was a packed closet and my step-grandpa's room. It used to be my sister's. I'll tell you what happened in a second, but let me just say this first. I'm an atheist, and openly identified as one in late middle school. And because of this, I started to doubt that the haunted stuff was a ghost, and thought like it was weird science stuff or time stuff. But this event made me really doubt that. Though, I still don't think ghosts are dead people or any of that. It's just unexplained to me. So one day, I heard my sister scream as I was lying on my top bunk listening to music. I walked over expecting that my younger brother was hitting her, and heard, over my music, stomping upstairs. I took my headphones off and looked, and there wasn't anyone there, but yet they kept coming towards me. The steps came all the way up to one of the top steps, and you could hear and feel it in the floor. Like, had I been a blind man, you could not have convinced me that a 200-pound man had not just angrily stomped up that staircase. But I couldn't see anything. My brother, sister, and we backed toward the slanted attic wall, freaking out, and I was standing at the top step. At first in shock, and then I broke out laughing. I remember thinking that it was a really strange thing to laugh at, but I thought it was funny to point out that if I was ever a ghost, I would do that to people. Afterwards, I checked the closet downstairs, and it was totally packed full of boxes, to the point where, even if you could get through, you couldn't move your arms and legs much, never mind perfectly emulate a stomping man. Also, if you pushed up on the stairs, they would pop up. My dad built that staircase pretty shittily. There were a lot of other weird events at my house, many of which other family members had witnessed, and just other common stuff that occurred like monthly. I was always afraid to go downstairs at night for water, and started drinking from the bathroom sink. So what I think is the weirdest thing about all of this is that something occurred years later in a different house. I was 18 and had told my girlfriend about all this haunting stuff, and she believed me. I had an in-law apartment in the same city as my mum's house, and we were watching TV. One day, the door to my bedroom just swung open and hit the wall. I shut the door and showed her how well latched it was. It was locked. There was a gap at the bottom where the air could move through, and there were no open windows, and it was a calm day. I asked her if she thought that the door may not have been closed that well before, and that maybe it happened because the door wasn't locked tight. She said no, that it was definitely locked. So I locked up the door again, and I had this really strange feeling that it was going to happen again, which was totally random and so unusual. I figured that she half-heartedly believed me, that it wasn't the air, seeing as pressure can do that. But about 10 minutes later, it did the very same thing, violently, and the door was now unlocked again. There was really no explanation for it, especially since the rooms were pretty airtight. Even to this day, I have no idea what happened, and nothing has happened ever since. I still have nightmares about that house though, and ever since I've lived there, I've always felt like something was following me. This specific event started when I moved to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, about 6 years ago. During the first couple of months after moving into my small house, me and my wife started noticing some pretty typical yet frightening events. I will say that I'm pretty sensitive to paranormal events, and my wife hates that about me. When I first met her, she was really skeptical and didn't believe me. So, I guess the real first event that happened in the house was while I was at work. I came home to my wife freaking out, and she kept saying that someone was walking in the attic. I assured her that nobody could possibly walk up there. It was a one-story house, and the attic was barely tall enough to crouch in. I convinced her to blow it off, telling her that it was probably an old house making noises. This went on for 2 to 3 months until she was convinced that someone was up there. She didn't want to stay home alone anymore, so I bought her a dog. About a week after our new puppy adoption, I went into the kitchen for something, and every single cupboard door was open. The fridge, the doors, all of it. As soon as I saw that, I knew something was wrong. Nothing was missing, but everything was just open. So, we did what any rational person would do. I layered the floor with flour so as to try and catch the person. We woke up the next day. We found that the flour had been moved, as though someone had dragged something through it, but no footprints could be seen. This is the point we realized that we might have something interesting happening here. After dealing with this for a couple of months, the scariest thing that's ever happened to me occurred. I get anxiety just talking about this part. In fact, my eyes are watering and I'm choking up as I write this. I've only ever told 2 people about this, my wife and her mother. It's 1:30 a.m. here and I am officially tripping balls. Okay, so one night we go to bed, around a normal hour, and our dog sleeps with us every night. I wake up around 2:30 or 3 a.m. because I hear this deep growling noise. It's my dog. He's laying at the foot of my bed, and I notice that my bedroom door is wide open, and as soon as I lay eyes on it, I gasp for air. My wife wakes up, freaking out, thinking that I'm dying. My dog sees this thing and takes off and chases it. He chases it into the bathroom, where there's no windows and no escape. I run into the bathroom as he's barking, and there's nothing there. Now, I'm going to try and describe what we saw to the best of my ability, but it's hard to explain it. I honestly would have blown this off as a night terror had my dog not so violently woke me up and chased something into the bathroom. So, as I sat up in my bed while my dog was growling, I saw something peeking around the corner of my doorframe. It was only about 4 feet tall and it had its 3 fingers wrapped around the frame of the door, peeking its head in and staring at me while I slept. The only way I can describe it is it had 2 small horns, and it was all black in color. It had 3 very long fingers with very sharp nails on the doorframe. The only facial features I could see were its eyes, glowing white, locked onto mine, and that's when my dog jumped up and chased this thing. I have looked everywhere online for answers as to what this thing is, even every demonology book I could find, but there was nothing. Honestly, I don't know what to think about this, and it still gives me anxiety just thinking about it to this day. I work on a small dairy farm in the upper Midwest. It kind of has a weird layout, but I'll try my best to explain it. Right when you walk in, there's the milk house. Then you keep going and you're on the parlour. Once you go to the edge of the parlour, you can turn left into our calf barn, or right and make your way to the big barn where the milking cows are. Also, I should mention that the calf barn is connected to an older barn that we keep the pregnant cows in. The doors are never locked because we have people coming in at random times throughout the day, plus it's a barn, and there are doors literally everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Anyways, I'm a female who is fairly tiny, maybe 5'5", 120-ish pounds, and mind you, I'm still in high school. One night, I was working the night shift, so anywhere between 8:30 and 2 a.m, because you never know how long barn might take sometimes. Every shift, we work with another person, and this night happened to be with another high schooler, about my age. Every shift, we milk the first pen, and then I'll go into the calf barn and turn the lights on, and start the pasteurizer so I can feed the calves. So I went in and did that, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and I went back to help milk the second pen. After the second pen, I went to feed the calves. So here's the layout of the calf barn. There's an alley down it, with the weaned calves on the left and the hay and the grain on the right for feeding them, and at the end of it is a big room. There's a row of 7 hutches right as you walk in, from left to right, and then 2 in the left corner. Then there are 6 pens, 3 on each side, with a little milk house in the middle for feeding purposes. The doors to the milk house are always closed to keep it warm in there, so I go in there and start my normal feeding routine, still not noticing anything strange. Then I open the door on the other side of the milk house to feed the far pens, and that's when I noticed that the older, almost wean calves in the right pen were really skittish. I ignored it at first and went about what I was doing, and then I saw him. There was a man huddled in the corner of the pen, just sitting there in all black, and bundled up because it was cold as hell out that night. But he just sat there, looking at me, smiling, in between those 2 far pens and a double door that, again, isn't locked, making it easy for someone to get in like that. Anyways, I was holding a 5-gallon bucket filled with milk, and I dropped it, spilling it all over the ground. I've never booked it so fast in my life. I told my co-worker what had happened, and we hid in the break room for a little bit with our barn dog. We eventually got the courage to go back and check it out, but the man was gone, and the double doors were wide open. Thinking back, we should have called the cops on him for trespassing, but he never threatened us or the cows, and nothing went missing. I don't know if he was a homeless man looking for shelter in the cold or what. My barn is a tad far out of town for that. What scares me the most, though, is that I walked in there more than once a day and still didn't even notice him, so I have no idea how long he'd been watching me for. I've worked 2 night shifts since then, and I work another one tonight. Since then, I've been sure to scan the barn and lock the doors while I'm feeding. Update. Since the last time I updated you guys, some things have been occurring, like things going missing, cows being moved or let out, just things like that. But also just the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Plus, there's been a few mastitis cases recently, because people have been half-assed milking to get out of there fast. One thing that stood out to me though, was one night, I was feeding and used my knife to cut some baler twine, and set my knife on a bale while I was spreading some of it out. I guess I forgot to grab my knife before I went back to milk because at the end of my shift, I realized I didn't have it. So I went back for it, but when I got there, it was gone. I kind of brushed it off and thought maybe I dropped it in the hay when I was feeding and one of the cows swallowed it. I was kind of just like, shit. But I called my boss and told him, and things were good except that I no longer had a knife. So, coming to tonight then, I've only just gotten home, and it's close to 10 AM right now, which normally I'll get home around midnight if we're talking average, so it's been pretty eventful. I went to feed the calves, and as I walked through the weaned calf alley, I noticed hay coming through the ceiling and some shuffling. I kind of ignored it and went about what I was doing, thinking maybe it was like an animal like a mouse or even a cat or something. I was in the calf room at this point, and all of a sudden a full 45-pound hay bale just gets thrown off the side of the loft, which I could see from an opening to the right of the hutches. Those bales were nowhere near the edge where they could fall, so that bale was clearly thrown. It was around 11 PM at this time, and I was scared shitless. I went and got my co-worker, who was a guy in his 20s, and we went up to the loft. We were only up there for not even a minute before we saw the man. He had kind of made a little makeshift house or fort with bay hails, and was just sitting there, staring at the ground. Luckily for us, he didn't notice us, and we contacted the police. They got there within 20 minutes, and so did our boss. They caught the guy, who we later found out was a 53-year-old male who spent the last 20 years in a mental facility, only about half an hour from the barn. He was released by his family against medical advice sometime about a month or so ago, and went missing shortly after. He had been living in the barn all this time. I'm not sure what he'd been eating, or how we hadn't noticed him, or anything in the loft previously, but we finished our chores while the police continued to search the barn. And the thing I found most unsettling is that they found my knife clenched in his fist. I don't know how messed up he was in the head or what his intentions were with my knife, but I'm also glad that I never had to find out. Scarily enough though, he is now legally considered a threat to society, and his family no longer has the authority to release him from the facility. All of which suggests that I'm a pretty lucky person. G'day mates, it's Busta here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. And you know, all these stories about ghosts reminded me about this story of a ghost bird that used to haunt a beach not far from me. I think it was called a seagull? Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their story for us all here, and I hope you guys are doing really well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And as always, keep them coming, guys, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also, guys, please do me a favor and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with a short written statement of consent, just so that I can be above board with everything. And also remember to tell me in the email if you would like to remain anonymous, and please also change any names if you don't want particular names to be shared. As always, guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and everything else for updates throughout the week. You can also catch me on my second channel now, as I'll be uploading my live streams there. All of which I have links in the description below for you. Thanks again for always tuning in, guys, for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.